Something happened on that mountain. We don't know what it was. We've never known. And the people who might have known, 9 of them, are all dead. What we do know is this: they were running. In the dark. In -40-degree cold. Barefoot, some of them. Half-dressed. Away from their tent. Away from their supplies. Away from everything that could have kept them alive. They ran toward the trees. And one by one, they stopped. This is the story of the Dyatlov Pass Incident. And 65 years after it happened, the case is still open. It is January 1959. The Soviet Union. A group of 10 students and graduates from the Ural Polytechnic Institute set out on an expedition through the northern Ural Mountains. Their goal is straightforward: ski across 190 miles of rugged terrain and reach a mountain called Otorten. It is a Grade 3 expedition, the highest difficulty level in the Soviet certification system at the time. These are not beginners. Every single one of them has done this before. The group is led by a 23-year-old engineering student named Igor Dyatlov. He is meticulous, experienced, respected, the kind of person who plans everything twice. With him are 7 other men and 2 women, all in their early 20s, all capable, all excited. One of them, a man named Yuri Yudin, turns back on day 4, a flare-up of joint pain. He says his goodbyes, watches the others ski toward the mountains, and heads home. He will carry what happened next with him for the rest of his life. He is the only one who survives. On February 1st, the remaining 9 make camp on the eastern slope of a mountain called Kolet-Syakhl. In the local Mansi language, that name translates to one thing: Dead Mountain. It is the last place they will ever sleep. The search party doesn't go out until February 20th, 19 days after the group made camp on Dead Mountain. When they finally reach the site, what they find doesn't make sense. The tent is still there. It has been cut open from the inside. Not a tear. Not an accident. Someone took a knife and slashed through the fabric deliberately, from the interior, as if they needed to get out immediately. As if there was no time to use the entrance. The 9 hikers' belongings are still inside. Their food, their boots, their extra clothing, camera, a journal. Everything they needed to survive is sitting in that tent, untouched. But the hikers are gone. The search party finds the first 2 bodies about 1.5 kilometers from the tent. They are at the edge of a tree line, near the remnants of a small fire that has long since burned out. They are barefoot. They are wearing only underwear. In -40 degrees. The next 3 bodies are found between the tree line and the tent. Their postures suggest they were trying to crawl back. Back toward the tent. Back toward warmth, toward their things, toward survival. They didn't make it. Cause of death: hypothermia. All 5 of them. The other 4 are harder to find. The snow has covered everything. It isn't until May, 3 months later, when the snow begins to melt, that a search party discovers a hollow dug into a ravine about 75 meters from the tree line. A makeshift snow shelter. And inside it, the last 4 bodies. And this is where the case stops being a tragedy and becomes something else entirely. Because these 4 did not die of hypothermia. One of them, Nikolai Thibault-Brignoles, has a massive fracture to his skull. Not a surface wound, a deep, structural fracture. The kind of force required to cause it is enormous. 2 others, Ludmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov, have crushed chests, multiple broken ribs. Their sternums are fractured. The lead forensic investigator, a man named Boris Vozrozdeny, later states that the force required to cause these injuries was comparable to a car crash, a high-speed collision. But there are no external wounds, no bruising on the skin, no sign of impact from outside. The trauma came from within. And Ludmila Dubinina, the woman with the crushed ribs, is missing her tongue. Her eyes, soft tissue, gone. There is no explanation on record for where they went. The Soviet government opens an investigation. They question locals, examine the bodies, study the campsite. After several months, they close the case. The file is sealed. The cause of death is listed officially as, and I want you to hear this clearly, an unknown compelling force. That is all they write. And then they bury the file and don't speak of it again for 30 years. Let's stay in that tent for a moment. because understanding what happened before the cutting matters. The group's last journal entry is dated February 1st, 1959. It is routine, cheerful even. They note the weather, the distance covered, a few jokes. Nothing unusual. There are photographs recovered from cameras found at the scene. The last ones taken before the hikers died. One image, in particular, is deeply strange. It shows something, a blurred light source or shape in the distance. The image is not clear enough to identify. Some researchers believe it shows a glowing orb. Others think it's lens flare. Nobody agrees on what it is, but it was photographed deliberately. Someone pointed a camera at it and pressed the shutter. Then the tent was cut from the inside. Now the theories. The first and most discussed is infrasound, a naturally occurring low-frequency sound wave, below the range of human hearing, produced by certain wind conditions moving across mountain terrain. Infrasound at specific frequencies is known, documented, studied, to cause profound psychological effects in humans. Panic, disorientation, an overwhelming feeling of dread, a sensation that something is deeply wrong, that something is there, that you must leave immediately. It bypasses conscious thought entirely. It goes straight to the fear response. It is invisible and silent. The wind conditions on Dead Mountain that night were extreme. The terrain is exactly the kind of geography that can generate infrasound. If the 9 hikers were exposed to it while sleeping, they would have experienced a sudden, violent, irrational terror. Not a choice, a biological command. Get out. Get out now. They cut the tent and ran. That is one theory. The second is the slab avalanche. In 2021, 2 Swiss scientists published a study in the journal Communications Earth and Environment. They used computer modeling to demonstrate that a specific type of rare snow formation, a slab avalanche, could have occurred on the Dyatlov slope under those precise weather conditions. A slab of dense snow, not a full avalanche, but a concentrated block, sliding silently in the dark. It would have been enough to cause crush injuries consistent with what the bodies showed. It would have forced the group out of the tent. It would have left almost no visible trace by the time rescuers arrived weeks later. The Russian government, when they reopened the case in 2019, settled on a version of this theory. Case closed. Again. But researchers have pointed out the problems. The slope on which the tent was pitched is not steep enough for a standard avalanche of any kind. Veteran mountaineers who have studied the case say the snow at that location does not behave that way. And the slab theory, even if accepted, explains the crush injuries, but it does not explain the missing tongue. It does not explain the missing eyes. It does not explain the orange skin. The orange, waxy discoloration of the body's skin was noted in the autopsy reports and never explained. Decomposition alone doesn't account for it. Some researchers point to exposure to specific chemical agents, rocket fuel, radioactive materials as possible causes. And here is where the conspiracy angle becomes harder to dismiss than it sounds. The Ural Mountains in 1959 were not empty. The Soviet military used the region actively for weapons testing. Rocket launches, possibly nuclear tests. The area was politically sensitive in ways that ordinary Soviet citizens would not have known. When researchers in later decades tried to access the full investigation file, they found that several pages were simply missing. Not damaged, not illegible, gone. Why would pages be removed from a file about 9 dead hikers on a mountain? Locals from the Mansi indigenous community told investigators at the time that they had seen strange glowing spheres in the sky over the mountains in the days around the hikers' deaths. The Soviet military, when asked, confirmed that they had conducted tests in the region around that period, but provided no further detail. One investigator, Lev Ivanov, who led the original Soviet inquiry, gave an interview decades later, after the Soviet Union had collapsed. He said on record that he had been explicitly ordered by senior officials, to classify the case and attribute the deaths to a natural cause. He said he had personally witnessed evidence that suggested something far more unusual. He did not say what that evidence was. He died shortly after giving the interview. The full file, when finally partially declassified, contains a detail that most summaries leave out. Several of the hikers' clothing items, when tested later by independent researchers, showed elevated levels of radiation. Not deadly levels, but elevated, present, unexplained. Radiation on a mountain hiking trip. In 1959, in a region the Soviet military refused to discuss. Return to Ludmila. She is 20 years old. She is one of the most capable hikers in the group. Her body is found in the snow shelter for months after she died, with her ribs crushed and her tongue gone. The official explanation for the missing tongue: decomposition. Soft tissue deteriorates. Animals may have accessed the body. Boris Vozrozdeny, the forensic examiner who personally handled these autopsies, later stated that the injuries to Ludmila and Semyon were the most disturbing he had ever seen in his entire career. He said, and this is his own account, that he had never seen internal trauma of that magnitude without any corresponding external wound. No bruise, no cut, no point of impact visible on the skin, just internal devastation. The force, he said, must have come so fast that the tissue had no time to bruise. Think about what that means. Think about how fast something must move to cause a fatal crush injury without leaving a mark on the outside of a human body. And then understand that whatever caused that injury happened in the dark on a frozen mountain to a group of highly trained, experienced people, who then lay down in a snow shelter and did not try to escape. The four in the shelter appear to have been alive for some time after whatever happened to them. Long enough to build the shelter. Long enough to organize themselves. They did not flee. They did not try to go back to the tent. They lay down together and waited. For what? That question has never been answered. 65 years of investigation, declassified files, scientific studies, and first-hand testimonies. And still, at the center of this case, there is a silence that does not fill. 9 people cut their tent and ran from something. Whatever it was, they knew they couldn't outrun it. Yuri Yudin, the one who turned back on day 4, spent the rest of his life thinking about his friends. He identified their personal belongings after the bodies were found. He attended the funerals. He gave interviews decade after decade, each time hoping someone would finally have an answer. He studied the case himself as a private obsession, long after investigators had moved on. He died in 2013, at the age of 75. He never got an explanation. The pass itself, the nameless stretch of mountain through which the group was traveling, was renamed in their memory. It is called Dyatlov Pass now, after Igor, the leader, the 23-year-old who chose Dead Mountain. The mountain still stands. The slope where the tent was pitched still looks exactly the same as it did in February 1959. Cold, empty, completely ordinary in appearance. And every year people still hike there, still try to understand, still come back with photographs and questions. The wind across that mountain is a specific kind of sound, constant, below the range of hearing. You don't hear it, you feel it. And for reasons science hasn't fully explained, when you feel it for long enough, something in your body says run. Nobody has ever figured out exactly why. The Dyatlov Pass case remains officially unsolved.